Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we'll begin reading text 12 of chapter 7, which is entitled Knowledge of the Absolute. Text 12. Ye chaiva sattvika bhava rajasastamasaschaye mata eveti tan vidhi natvaham teshu te mai. Translation. All states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the modes of this material nature. Text 13. Tribhir gunamayar bhavar ebhi sarvam idam jagat mohitam na pijanati mam ebhya param avyayam. Translation. Deluded by the three modes, goodness, passion, and ignorance, the whole world does not know me, who am above the modes and inexhaustible. Text 14. Daivihi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mamiliye prapadyante mayametam tarantite. This divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. Text 15. Namam dushkritino mudha prapadyante naradamaha mayaya parithagyana asuram bhavam ashritaha. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Text 16. Chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritino arjuna artho jigasur artharthi Jnani cha bharatarshava. O best among the Bharats, Arjuna, 4 kinds of pious men render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Text 17. Tesham jnani nitya yukta eka bhakti vishishyate Vyahi jnanino tyartham aham sacha mama priyaha. Of these, the wise one who is in full knowledge in union with me through pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. Text 18. Udara sarva evaite jnani tvatmaiva me matam Ashtita sahi yuktatma mam evanu tamam gatim. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me I consider verily to dwell in me. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he attains me. Text 19. Bahunam janmanam ante gyanavanma prapatyate Vasudeva Savarmiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. After many births and deaths, he who is actually in knowledge surrenders unto me, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Such a great soul is very rare. Text 20. Kamaisthaistairthita jnana prapadyante anyadevataha Tam tam niyamam asthaya prakritya niyathasvaya. Those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Text 21. Yo yo yam yam tanum bhakta shudhayarchitum ichhati tasya tasyachalam shradham tham eva vidadham yaham. I am in everyone's heart as the super soul. As soon as one desires to worship the demigods, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to some particular deity. We read one more, or it's 22. Sataya shradaya yuktas tasya radhanam ihate lapate cha tatakaman mayaiva vihitan hitan. Endowed with such a faith, he seeks favors of a particular demigod and obtains his desires. But in actuality, these benefits are bestowed by me alone. So we can go back to text 12. Ye chaiva satvika bhava rajasas tamasaschaye mataive titan vidhi natvaham teshu te mai. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All states of being, be they of goodness, passion, or ignorance, are manifested by my energy. I am, in one sense, everything, but I am independent. I am not under the molds of this material nature. Purport. All material activities in the world are being conducted under the three modes of material nature. Although these material modes of nature are emanations from the Supreme Lord, Krishna, he is not subject to them. For instance, under the state laws, one may be punished, but the king, the lawmaker, is not subject to that law. Similarly, all the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are emanations from the Supreme Lord Krishna, but Krishna is not subject to material nature. Therefore, he is nirguna, which means that these gunas or modes, although issuing from him, do not affect him. That is one of the special characteristics of Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everybody, for being here to hear Srimad Bhagavad-gita. If Maharaj is wanting, if he'd like to make any comments, I'd humbly request that.
Krishna says here that he's everything. So he's speaking as God. In other words, God is everything. A lot of people say that God is everything. That's true. But God is independent from everything at the same time. And everything is under the modes of material nature, but he's not under the modes of material nature. So there's a difference. He's everything, and then again, he's outside of everything. And he's completely unattached to the modes of material nature. The example of the king is good because the king there are laws that regulate the citizens, but he's not regulated by those laws in one sense. He's above the law. The king can do no wrong or something like that. In the ideal situation, even if it appears that he's telling a lie, for example, like Krishna told Yudhishthira to tell a lie, that wouldn't have been considered a breaking of the law because he was acting under a higher principle, and that is under God's direct instruction. So God is not bound by any of the laws of the modes of material nature. Just like, for example, according to the modes of material nature, someone dies. Everyone gets a body and they have to give it up. But Krishna has no material body. He has a spiritual body. So he's not under the laws of material nature. He doesn't get old. We don't see Krishna aging, and he doesn't get diseased. He's completely above everything. And even if he supposedly does something immoral beyond the laws, he's not punished, because who's going to punish him? There's no one who is equal to him. He's greater than everyone. So to understand God fully, one needs to hear from the authorities, hear from God himself. Bhagavad-gita, he's saying that I'm everything in one sense. Sarvam kalvidam Brahma. Everything is Brahma. That's Brahma means spirit, Brahma means God, the greatest. So he's everything in that sense. Then again, he's beyond everything. Must be. Because if he's everything, if he's part of it, then there's a beginning date. But no, he's the original source and he's eternal. And all of his parts and parcels, living entities, are eternal. That particular characteristic they share with him, that they are eternal and they're individual and they're conscious. So actually they're very fortunate to have such characteristics similar to God's. But the individual living entity, either by himself or all amalgamated of all the living entities, together joined forces, still they would not equal God or Krishna. And that person, God, is Krishna. He has different forms that he manifests to execute his different pastimes, his desires. He likes sometimes to have a fight with someone. So that's okay for a person sometimes. So then he has some of his devotees dress up like enemies and he may have a fight with them. And then he has romantic desires. Where do they come from? They come from God. They're not absent in God, but they're pure in God. Everything is pure in him, and therefore whatever he does, even if it's fighting, the combatant gets liberated, gets purified of all sins. Even Kamsa, who was so demoniac, he did everything against Krishna he could do, Krishna's family. But because he was touched by Krishna, he became purified. And he was qualified. He went back to home, went to Vaikuntha, and became a four-handed Vaikunthavasi. This is described in the Garga Samhita, that he comes along with his 8 brothers to visit Ugrasena and Krishna and the others at these Ashwamedha sacrifice, Rajasuya sacrifice of Ugrasena. So you can see the amazingness of God. He's so pure that even if someone works against him all the time, hates him supposedly, he doesn't have hatred towards anyone else. And he can transform that person into a perfectly pure devotee in a moment. That's God. That's how great he is. And we are little individual entities, jivas, parts and parcel of God. And we have a chance to, in this lifetime, to be reminded of what our duty is. What are we supposed to do? Why are we here? Instead of thinking, I'm just here. Animal doesn't think. Animal doesn't think, why have I been put here? What's my purpose? He immediately begins eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's all he knows. But the human being can ponder the great questions. Who am I? Where am I from? What is God? What's the purpose of life? And God gives the answers directly in Bhagavad-gita. How anyone can ignore Bhagavad-gita is remarkable. How they can think that there's something else more important to read. And God is speaking himself, talking about himself and talking about us and what he wants us to do. So therefore, it seems this would be the most important topic on everybody's list of important things to do, books to read, etc.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj. This notion that everything that Krishna does is the best for everybody. You know, this is Krishna. This is the absolute truth. So Krishna, everything is harmonized when it comes in contact with Krishna. And when we are operating out of the scope of being connected with Krishna, then instantly things become unharmonious. It becomes disastrous, becomes chaotic. And as Maharaj was mentioning, that how could we ignore the words of God himself? He was talking about himself spiritually, materially, everything about our creation and existence here in the situation that we're in, and how we can be freed from this conundrum that we're stuck in. And one can realize, because when one takes to following these teachings and takes up the practice, they get direct realization of this absolute truth. And this is exactly what Krishna is saying in this chapter. So this chapter is quite significant because it's explained that the middle 6 chapters, there's 18 chapters in the Bhagavad-gita, and the middle 6 chapters are the essence, and it's kind of encased in by the previous 6 and the latter 6 chapters. So leading up to this point, Krishna is speaking about your spirit soul. You're not your body. He's giving a basic rundown of, you know, what's spirituality, what's material, and how to act in life without becoming attached to the results. Shri Shri Gaura Ki Jai. Primarily nishkama karma yoga, meaning to act being free of the lusty results of the fruits and acting. In this way, one can go through life a lot happier. But Krishna, in the 6th chapter, he describes, which it's called Dhyana Yoga, or here Sankhya Yoga, which Krishna describes this process of Ashtanga Yoga, which is manipulating the mind, controlling the mind to fixate it on the absolute truth, which Arjuna later rejected because it's too difficult to sit and just control the mind and constantly control the mind unwaveringly, like a flame, you know, and whenever it wanders, you just bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. Because before this, the whole time Krishna's talking about how to actually act and be unattached to the results. So Arjuna's a warrior. He's very active. He's used to action. But then Krishna, he's describing at the end of that chapter of all the yogis, and of all yogis, he who always abides in me with great faith, worshiping me in transcendental loving service, is most intimately united with me in yoga and is the highest of all. So Krishna is speaking almost a little bit, I wouldn't say vague, but not super direct about yoga meaning just to me. He's talking about yoga as it means to connect of self-realization. And then at the end of the chapter, he explicitly says, yes, the best of yogis is one who thinks of me, which leads to the 7th chapter where we were reading yesterday, which Magadari was speaking on this verse mostly, where Krishna says, now here, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. And then he says, I shall now declare unto you this in full this knowledge, both phenomenal and nominal, by knowing which there will remain nothing further to know. Because Krishna is the absolute truth. So once we understand Krishna, what else is there to know? Because everything that's connected to Krishna is meaningful, and whatever's disconnected from Krishna is simply Maya. This is, as Krishna explains to Lord Brahma in the Chatur Shloki of the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, whatever is connected to me, it's substantial. And whatever's not, know it to be my illusory energy. So, you know, something I like about this part of the Chatur Shloki of the Bhagavatam is that Afterwards, the Lord speaks to Brahma and tells him to expand upon this point, expand upon this notion. You know, we can look up on the wall here and you see Brahma, Narada, Vyasadeva, and, you know, one is teaching the other, and they're elaborating more and more on this point because the absolute truth is infinite, and we can derive so many different angles of vision of looking at the same absolute truth, which will never get boring. It will never wear out. It will never become tired. And then bringing that to the point of the Chatur Shloki, which means like the 4 essential verses of the Bhagavad-gita. One of them, Krishna says, Matchita matgata prana bodhayanta parasparam katayantas chimam nityam tushyanti cha ramanti cha. My devotees, they'll derive unending bliss and satisfaction by rejoicing and discussing about this katha, this Krishna katha, this talk of the absolute truth, this talk of the science of God. So that's why we can sit here and, I mean, I just came from Vrindavan, so here it's like a small, quiet town. We could sit here in a small, quiet town and just talk about the Bhagavad-gita endlessly, day after day, and never get tired, and always derive more and more realizations because it's ever fresh and it's ever new. You know, we're conditioned souls, and we're affected by these modes of material nature, which Krishna is saying, that we just read, these modes of material nature come from him, but he's not limited to them. He's above them. He's in control, but at the same time, he's aloof, separate from everything altogether. But we have to admit and accept and realize and come to terms with where we're at, the desires that we have that are not so in line with Krishna consciousness, the anarthas that we have, the envy that we have, the anger, the lust, the greed, all this junk that sits in our hearts. And as we take up to devotional service, if we're sincerely practicing, then these things will be revealed. Because say you come into a room and the room is very dirty and there's not so good lighting. It's hard to see that it's dirty. But once you turn the lights on, immediately you can see this place is filthy and we gotta clean it up. We have to do something. So similarly, when we're coming in contact with Krishna, Krishna's like the light. And where there's Krishna, there can be no Maya. So that when we're directly in contact with Krishna, this light is shining on ourselves, and we can see, oh yeah, I still have ulterior desires. I have different motives. I have lust. This is okay. This is understandable. We're conditioned souls. One day we know nothing of spiritual life, nothing of God, nothing of Krishna, just some kind of speculation or some ill-propagated religious movement. And then we come into contact with the Bhagavad-gita, hear from a pure devotee, and then instantly, you know, we know everything. Ananda was always here, and he would always make the point that, you know, day one, you come into Krishna consciousness, you know everything. Like, you know, here's Radha, here's Krishna. These are the supreme enjoyers. You're the servant of them. You're conditioned and you're trying to enjoy on your own. You think you're your body. You're not your body. This is the source of all problems. But if you can turn to serve them and bring them pleasure, then you will derive the most satisfaction in life. Simple. I got it. Haribol, Haribol. But no, then this Cheto Darpana Marjanam, this cleansing of the dust of the heart. You know, this is this movement that Lord Chaitanya came and brought to us for us fallen souls of the age of Kali. So we should always take to this congregational chanting, this not just chanting, but kirtan, glorification of the Lord. So like I mentioned, we can always derive more and more things to talk about. And, you know, this beginning of the 7th chapter that we were reading yesterday is so nice because Krishna, he's saying, he begins to describe his supremacy, and he does so by saying earth, water, fire, air, ether, you know, the 5 elements, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, the subtle elements, they all comprise his separated material energies. So Krishna is saying, whatever that's here, this material energy, it's coming from him. But then after that, he also says this inferior nature that he just described, there's also superior nature, which is the living entities who are actually here encased, trapped in these material elements. But then the nice part is that after this, he says, I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun and the moon, the syllable Om and the Vedic mantras, I am the sound and ether and the ability in man. I am the original fragrance of the earth, and I am the heat and fire. I am the life to all that lives. I am the penance of all ascetics. So what's Krishna actually saying? He's not just saying, this is all my material energy. He's saying, I am fire. I am also all the heat in the fire. I am the light within the fire. I am water as the element. I'm also the taste of water. I am the living entities, which are the tatashta potency, the marginal energy, the living entities. And I'm also the capability in man, the ability in man, the strength of the strong. Krishna says, I am intelligence, false ego, all these things. Krishna says, I am the intelligence of the intelligent. So he's saying he is this and everything, but he's also the essence of that. Similarly how he's saying the modes of material nature are coming from him, but he's also behind it. So whatever we can see and perceive, feel, think, everything is coming from Krishna. We are never separated from God. We can never be separated from God. So Maya, this illusion, is us thinking that we're separated from God and trying to enjoy on our own, which I think Krishna Bhagavan pointed out earlier today is, we can either choose to serve God directly or we're going to serve indirectly. So one path is filled with problems and one path is filled with bliss and ecstasy. Which one should we choose? And the great thing is we could see devotees who have taken up this path and reaped the results, the benefits, and how clear it is. How people can come from such hellish backgrounds, such addictive circles, such, traumatic lives, and then instantly they take the chanting Hare Krishna and then transcendental realizations. They come to Sattva Guna and beyond, Shuddha Sattva, the transcendental platform, which is interesting because in the shloka or the purport that Mogadari was reading yesterday, Prabhupada was mentioning this and he was highlighting the second chapter, the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where the science of Bhakti Yoga is clearly explained. That from the platform of hearing from a pure devotee, serving the devotees, serving the Bhagavat, hearing and going on, then this dust, this covering of our heart, the ignorance is removed and one comes to the platform of goodness and then beyond goodness. And at that point, he becomes transcendentally situated and then he becomes free from the lower modes of material nature, which rids us of all this lust and envy and all this junk that brings us problems all day long. And one's situated in the transcendental platform where he becomes happy. This is the scientific process. And, with any scientific experiments, what happens? One has to try it. And once one tries it, there's a result. And if the result doesn't work, what's the loss? Then you could see where it went wrong. But if it does work, okay, let's do more. Let's give more. And Krishna, he says, I reward those according to their degree of surrender. As we surrender as much as we want to know Krishna, as we give to Krishna, Krishna will reveal himself to us. We just want a little bit of Krishna, Krishna, he'll give us a little bit. And we could see this. We read that there's 4 different kinds of people who turn to Krishna. Those who are desiring wealth, those who are suffering, those who are inquisitive, and those who are actually seeking knowledge of God. We could see people who just want a little bit of God. They go to church or the mosque or the temple or wherever it may be. And they go for some time and, they offer some prayers and they're doing as they were taught and as they learned and as they grew up in a certain culture. But Are they really seeking the essence of life, of actually trying to uncover the truth, to be free from all these problems that afflict us at all times? Maybe some are, but without proper knowledge, I mean, it will never happen. We need transcendental knowledge, this Shabda Brahma, this Apurashaya Shabda, this infallible knowledge that's coming from Krishna himself. And then when we hear that, immediately we can be woken up to our ignorance and learn to act properly. And then Krishna later in the Bhagavad-gita, he says, essentially, you can follow my teachings and you'll reap the results, but if you don't follow my teachings, you'll be lost to the false ego. Simply lost to the false ego, which is what we've been doing for so many lifetimes, which tricks us into believing that we'll be happy here in this material world. I mean, you could look and see people who have all the money in the world, all the wealth, all the fame, all the beauty. They're clearly not happy. You can see them in the movies or on Facebook or the news or TV, whatever, and people put up a front and they look happy, but then behind closed doors, they're dealing with the same problems. And actually, there's a shloka here in the end of the 6th chapter where Krishna, he highlights this point specifically because he's talking about learning to control the mind, and Arjuna says it's extremely difficult, I can't do it. And then Krishna basically says, tough, like you have to, if you want to take up yoga, you have to control the mind. Like done, you have to. So it's tough, but if you follow the proper means and with proper determination and proper practice, it's possible. So we have to control our mind, but we'll slip up. But when you do control your mind by these proper means, you will come to realizations. And Krishna, he says, I forget which shloka anyways, but the point is, by the dint of one's own realization with, all these problems that I'm speaking of, one can see the happiness and the stress of others. Okay. He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings, both in their happiness and distress, O Arjuna. And Prabhupada says in the purport, one who is Krishna conscious is a perfect yogi. He is aware of everyone's happiness and distress by dint of his own personal experience. The cause of the distress of a living entity is his forgetfulness of his relationship with God. And the cause of happiness is knowing Krishna to be the supreme enjoyer of all the activities of the human being. So because you're taking up this path as it's given by Krishna, and you're realizing that, when I try to serve Krishna and bring pleasure to Krishna, to God, to the Supreme Person, the Absolute Truth, then I'm free from all my problems and I become happy and I derive transcendental realizations. And when I try to hold on to my own desires and chase my temptations and succumb to my vices, my lower nature, there's always problems. Because one is endeavoring to control the mind, which is the seat that's controlling the senses that are always roaming, that get us into all these problems in this material world, then one can see other people's situation. And you could see that, they're clearly stuck in this cycle. They're not free from these things. So they may appear happy when they're out in front of a camera or out on the street, but there's no way they're free from these problems because I'm trying like anything to be free from these things. And it doesn't go away. Krishna Bhagavan, he made a great point earlier today, is that, the more you practice Krishna consciousness, the longer you go, the more you realize that you're like, this is tough. It's not going away. At first you come in and Haribol, we're spirit soul. I have no problems. I'm a pure devotee. But then after time you realize, I have this junk. I have this garbage. So we learn to be real with ourselves and deal with these things in the proper way by hearing transcendental knowledge and praying to the Lord and taking shelter of his holy names, taking shelter of the devotees. And then one has realizations of overcoming this. And then in this way, you'll never be deterred by seeing other people, because you could see their happiness is short-lived. Their distress is caused from them forgetting Krishna, so on and so forth. So let us always hear about Krishna. If anyone has any comments or questions, would like to mention anything, please feel free. Yes, Jagannath Prabhu.
You were saying something about how Krishna is the essence of everything, and he is also the gross element. So, like, I was wondering, what does that mean, that he is the essence? Like, what does being the essence, what does that mean? Like, could you go more in depth with this?
So Krishna is saying that, he begins saying that these modes of material nature are coming from him, but he's not subject to them. He's above them. So you look at this material energy, it's just an amalgamation, a constant flux of the modes of material nature that's moving everything that we see. It always, to the conditioned soul, it appears new and fresh, but it's actually just different changes and variations of these modes of material nature, which is driven by time. Krishna's eternal time. So, an example is, the colors, the primary colors. Are they red, yellow, and green? No, I'm not an artist. Blue, red, and yellow. So with these three colors, you mix them and you can make all the different shades of all the other colors to different degrees. So that's an example. So then Krishna says, beyond that, I am fire, I am earth, I am water, I am air. So all these different elements that we could see and perceive that are here, Krishna is saying he's the source of them. He's coming from them. So not just that he's that source also, but that we can taste water, that we can hear the ether and sound, the ability in man, like whatever that's actually there, Krishna is the driving factor of it. They'd have no potency without Krishna. Krishna enters in the material, the grossly, and he enters in the subtle. He's everything. So Krishna is saying this in a way because before, at the end of the 6th chapter, he says, who abides with me in faith, who thinks of him, he is the best yogi. Yogi namapi sarvesham, margatinanta atmana. So Krishna is also saying this to help us fix our mind on him. So he's giving us this mind-blowing realization so we can actually meditate on this. So then you should be able to see everything in Krishna at all times. And I'm pretty sure later in this chapter or previously, Krishna says just that. Anyways, one will be able to see Krishna at all times. And when one sees Krishna in this way, then he's never lost. And the person is very dear to Krishna. So if we're endeavoring to always see and remember Krishna in this way, as he's describing, instantly we become favored by Krishna. And, I was earlier talking about a scientific experiment. This is a great experiment. And, I recommend everybody to try it, maybe even once a day. I know I have to. Sometimes it's easy to get discouraged, deluded. You're doing other services, whatever it may be. Okay, let me just sit down and chant the Brahma Samhita. I don't understand the translations, what it actually means, but, let me chant it with my heart and the full feelings. Instantly, it brings some kind of satisfaction because you're chanting prayers that are specifically devised to glorify the Lord. And that's just an example from my own personal life, but you could try that. Sit down, read the Bhagavad-gita, sit down, read Srimad Bhagavatam, sit down and learn prayers of our great acharyas who are revealing ways to approach the Lord from our conditioned perspective. Just a few. examples. I hope that helps. Is there any other thoughts or comments? Yes.
I was wondering, the world that we live in and our bodies, these are all material things, and they're Krishna's external energy. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Manifestations of his external energy, right?
So what Krishna is saying here is that these are the manifestations of the external energy, his material energy.
Right. So my question is, the more that we become immersed within Krishna consciousness, does that mean that we become exposed to his internal energy more? Or will we ever have any access to that? Or we just stay external as long as we're with that external energy, as long as we're in the material world? Would that only be applicable when our physical bodies pass?
Srila Prabhupada, he gives the example, if you take an iron, like an iron rod for poking fire, and you stick it in fire, and you leave it where the fire is very hot and blazing, then that iron, it'll start glowing red, and it'll pick up the same propensity of that fire. But you take the iron out of the fire, dull iron. So yes, when we're associating with Krishna consciousness, when we're associating with Krishna in the form of his holy names, when we're discussing this process, this bhakti yoga process, this scientific process that Krishna is explaining, then it's also associating with Krishna. You know, everything we're doing, we're learning to associate with Krishna 24/7 in some way or form. It may not always be pure. It may be tinged with, you know, other kind of motives or remnants of different conditioned nature that we have. But yes, the more that we're associating with Krishna, then we become connected to this internal potency.
Thank you.
And you know, this is the nature of the soul, to be Satchidananda, which is eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge. So when we're connecting to Krishna, then this is the result. We're connecting with our true self, which is Satchidananda. And one test I've heard that we can use to measure, you know, if we're actually performing, you know, devotional service nicely, in the Bhagavatam, in the chapter I was mentioning earlier, the second chapter of the first canto, text 7, it says, Vasudevi Bhagavati, I always forget, Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayati Ashu Vairagam Jnanam Chayad Haitukam, meaning when one performs devotional service to the Supreme Lord Krishna, one automatically derives causeless knowledge and detachment. So if we're performing devotional service and associating with Krishna and, you know, connecting to this internal potency, then we'll derive transcendental realization, transcendental knowledge, and we'll derive detachment from the material energy, from this external energy, and detachment from everything that comes with it, which firstly is very gross. Because Krishna, when he's speaking to Arjuna, his first instruction saying, you're not your body, you know, you're spirit soul. So that's as gross as it gets, you know, this whole thing where we think we are. But then, you know, as we progress further in that light, Krishna, you know, he mentioned the intelligence, the mind, and the false ego. You know, these are the subtle coverings of the material energy. So the devotee becomes much more aware of these subtle aspects, you know, as one progresses, like I was mentioning. You know, if you're really endeavoring by the proper measure, then you'll become more aware of these impediments that are holding us back, because you take to the process and you get glimpses, you get taste, you get little drops of nectar. You know, this kirtan was really ecstatic. This was nice. Oh, I met this devotee. He was really amazing. You know, this prasadam was like, what? Like, I don't, I don't even know, but I feel so good afterwards. So, or we're reading the Bhagavad-gita and just we read one part and it just hits us. So the more that these things happen, the more you get this taste, and then you just want to give more, and then you get more, and you give more, and you get more. And that's what we're all doing. So let us become addicted to that. We're all so addicted to so many things. Let us become addicted to trying to please Krishna, trying to know Krishna, trying to give our heart to Krishna, because in that way we'll never be let down. Is there any final comments, questions, thoughts? Thank you, everybody, for hearing Srimad Bhagavad-gita as it is. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Bhagavad-gita as it is ki jai. Shri Shri Gauranatai ki jai. Panchakapatarubhyascha kripasinubhyeva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.